there's many addictions. Yes, there's the addiction to drugs, but there's also the addiction to consumerism. There's the addiction to sex, to the internet, to shopping, to food.
So, ich sollte wieder
The
da sein
Buddhists have this idea of
und
the
alles
hungry
sollte gut sein.
ghosts. The hungry ghosts are creatures with large empty bellies and
Nice.
small scrawny necks and tiny little
Mann,
mouths, so
das
they can
regt mich
never
auf
get
sowas,
enough.
weil
They can
ich
never
will nicht,
fill
dass
this
sowas
emptiness
passiert.
on the inside. And we all hungry ghosts in this society. We all have this emptiness. And so many of us are trying to fill that emptiness from the outside. And the addiction is all about trying to fill that emptiness from the outside. Now, if you want to ask the question of why people are in pain, you can't look at their genetics. You have to look at their lives. And in the case of my patients, my highly addicted patients, it's very clear why they're in pain, because they've been abused all their lives. They began life as abused children. All the women I worked with over a 12-year period, hundreds of them, they had all been sexually abused as children. And the men had been traumatized as well. The men had been
Sexually abusing children. I have so many problems in my life. And I can barely hang on. And I'm a man even. I cannot imagine, dude, the life of an abused young woman, of a child. I cannot imagine. I don't even want to think about it. The horror, man. That is, it's unthinkable, man. Wow, it's crazy.
Being sexually abused, neglected, physically abused, abandoned, and emotionally hurt over and over again. And that's why the pain. And there's something else here too. The human brain itself, as you heard already, develops an interaction with the environment. It's not just genetically programmed. So the kind of environment that a child has will actually shape the development of the brain. Now, I can tell you about 2 experiments with mice. You take a little mouse.
It is just like he says. When you're the youngest, your brain is the most plastic. So when you get all this trauma, your brain is molding into the trauma and then it keeps growing. It's not like it is done growing. No, it is growing the trauma. And that happened to me. That's why I think I am not diagnosed, but I think I would say I am a very big candidate for having complex complex PTSD. Right? So the younger the child, the more it is exposed to violence and abuse, the more you're laying the building blocks for its future, the foundation. And you mess up the foundation, you mess up the children's life. So if you are doing this knowingly to a child, there is no place for you in a room with me. Pray that is never gonna be the situation, you know. If I know something like this, that's why when you hear people say a child molester is going to prison, it's over, he's dead. Because I'm not the only one thinking like this. And yeah, there is some crazy people in prison, but they do have this sense of righteousness. I would even say, call it righteousness, right? Of getting shit done, dude. That these people don't last one day. And you know how they die? They get a shank up their ass. Sorry for being that graphic, but you know it's true.
Mouse, and you put food in his mouth, and he'll eat it and enjoy it and swallow it. But if you put the food down a few inches away from his nose, he will not move to eat it. He will actually starve to death rather than eat. Why? Because genetically, they knocked out the receptors for a chemical in the brain called dopamine. Dopamine is the incentive motivation chemical. Dopamine flows whenever we're motivated, excited, vital, vibrant, curious about something. when we're seeking food or a sexual partner. Without the dopamine, we have no motivation. Now, what do you think the addict gets? When the addict shoots cocaine, the addict shoots crystal meth, or almost any drug, they get a hit of dopamine in their brain. And the question is, what happened to their brains in the first place? Because it's a...
That's why I used to take all the drugs that I could. Because I was getting the dopamine artificially throughout all of my youth, right? Many, many years. Always high, always high. There was not a day I was not high. I did not care about anything. I just need to be high so I can escape. So I have this dopamine. So I have motivation just to hang on, to breathe. And I believe I slowly made a change of what gives me dopamine, but it's still messed up. Like I'm not getting the healthy dopamine hit from things that should give me it, you know. So it's very hard. Sometimes I wish like give me drugs, but nah, man, I'm much better off like this. And just from the like physiology, like you get sick, you get dependent. It's not worth it, man. It's just not worth it.
myth that drugs are addictive. Drugs are not by themselves addictive because most people who try most drugs never become addicted. So the question is, why are some people vulnerable to be addicted?
Exactly.
Just
The
like food is not
vulnerability
addictive,
is
but to
because
some people it is. Shopping is not addictive, but to
you've
some
been
people it is.
hurt in
Television
your
is not
childhood.
addictive, but to some people it is.
That
So the
opens you up.
question is, why the susceptibility?
So
There's
it
another
gets stigmatized in the society, and people say, you know, very bad things about people who would only smoke weed. For me, I say it's like only smoke weed because that's nothing. It's like it's not a even like taking cocaine for me, like it's nothing. Where do I draw the line and say, oh, that is a really hard drug? I think like heroin, but even heroin, I don't want to say anything good about heroin because I know how many lives it destroys. But even heroin, you could actually take in, I think, a safe environment, have everything clean. It's just never gonna happen, right? And that is the problem. But people demonize. They demonize drugs all over the how do you say? Like any drug is the same. And then you have on the same side you have tobacco and alcohol industry, and these guys somehow they do not count as drugs. In my book, absolutely drugs. Absolutely. Nicotine, insane drugs. Alcohol, insane drugs. It's the same for me. Nicotine and heroin is the same like nicotine, and alcohol is the same like heroin. I swear it's the same for me, and you can call me stupid. I know it's different in dependency, but for some it's not. For some people it's not, man. And it's just destroying as many lives and health. It's so crazy. But that to have these be accepted by society, ludicrous. It's lunacy. And then you demonize people for smoking weed. Again, I don't want to be an advocate for smoking weed because I'm not smoking weed since forever, and I don't need to and want to. But I know why people would do it, and they're good people. I know a lot of people smoking weed. They're good people. They're much better people than I know alcohol and cigarette smokers that are way worse people, in my book, anyways, for whatever that is worth. So whenever there is like a talk about this kind of subject, it's such a like silver lining. The gray zone is so big, and you never stop and think like, you know, people would talk shit about drug users while smoking and drinking. It's so crazy. The world is so crazy. Nobody thinks about what they're doing. Man, everything is so messed up, dude.
little experiment with mice where infant mice, if they're separated from the mothers, will not cry for their mothers. Now, what would that mean in the wild? It means that they would die,
The
because
world
only
is
the
messed
mother
up.
protects the child's life and nurtures the child. And why? Because genetically, they knocked out the receptors, the chemical binding sites in the brain for endorphins. And endorphins are our indigenous morphine-like substances. Endorphins are our own natural painkillers. And what morphine or what endorphins also do, they make possible the experience of love. They make possible the experience of attachment to the parent and the parent's attachment to the child. So these little mice without endorphin receptors in their brains will actually not call for their mothers. In other words, the addiction to these drugs, and of course the heroin and the morphine, what they do is they act on the endorphin system. That's why they work. And so the question is, what happens to people that they need these chemicals from the outside? Well, what happens to them is when they're abused as children, those circuits don't develop. When you don't have love and connection in your life, when you're very, very young, then those important brain circuits just don't develop properly.
It is so stupid. When I think about what happened to me, I feel so special that all this shit happened. Because, like, what the fuck? I feel like I never got love, never got a connection, you know. It's like I'm from a movie, you know. I never got it. I remember I was like in our new apartment, the very first one after the one, how old was I? I don't know, like 13 or something. And I was crying and I said to my mother, you guys don't love me. I wanna die and stuff. I remember. And nothing happened. Nothing changed ever. It's so crazy, dude, just to think about it. And I always thought everything is normal. Everybody goes through this shit. So that's why, like, I just think about it. I just have to laugh. Like, what the fuck have I been through, man? What the fuck, man? Just what the fuck?
And under conditions of abuse, things just don't develop properly, and their brains then are susceptible when they do the drugs. Now they feel normal, now they feel pain relief, now they feel love. And there's one patient said to me that when I first did heroin, she said, it felt like a warm, soft hug, just like a mother hugging a baby.
You are special.
Now, I've had that same emptiness, not to the same degree
I'm
as
just
my
angry.
patients.
I'm just
What
left with
happened to
so
me?
much
What
anger.
happened to me is that I was born in Budapest, Hungary in 1944.
Anger,
Jewish
anger,
parents,
anger,
just
anger.
before
Everything
the
is
Germans
unfair.
occupied
Anger,
Hungary.
anger,
And you know
anger.
what happened to the Jewish people in Eastern Europe? And I was 2 months old when the German army moved into Budapest, the Wehrmacht, and the day after they did, my mother phoned the pediatrician and she
Just
said,
angry.
would you please come and see Gabor, because he's crying all the time. And the pediatrician said, of course I will come to see him, but I should tell you, all my Jewish babies are crying. Now why? What do babies know about Hitler or genocide or war? Nothing. What we're picking up on is the stresses and the terrors and the depression of our mothers. And that actually shapes the child's brain. That actually shapes the child's brain. And of course, what happens then is I get the message that the world doesn't want me. Because if my mother's not happy around me, she must not want me. Why do I become a workaholic later? Because if they don't want me, at least they're going to need me.
Gabor, was ich dir alles erzählen
And I'll be an
könnte.
important doctor. And they're going to need me. And that way I can make up for the feeling of not being wanted in the
Krasser
first place.
Scheiß.
And what does that mean? It means that I'm working all the time. And when I'm not working, I'm consumed by buying music. What message do my kids get? My kids get the same message that they're not wanted. And this is how we pass it on. We pass on
Yep,
the
the cycle
trauma, and we
continues
pass on
forever.
the suffering unconsciously from one generation to the next. So obviously, there are many, many ways to fill this emptiness. And for each person, there's a different way of feeling the emptiness. But the emptiness always goes back to what we didn't get when we were very small.
And what am I supposed to do with my
small.
mother now? She's here. Like, what am I supposed to do with her? You know, hit her? What do I do? All I can do is ignore her. And that pains her enough. I know. That's so I'm doing it and I'm fine with it. I'm gonna say something. I don't know if I should say it. If she died, I would not care. I guess I would cry also a little bit just because of anger. But she died for me long time ago. And still I have a I see her life is very bad now. And I have pity. I just have pity. I made her like a t-shirt. And it was like a farewell. This is all you get from me. That's it. Goodbye. I think she understands because since I've been little, I told her like, yeah, doesn't mean anything to me. That's so crazy. I'm afraid that I'm going to jail at some point because of what I'm gonna do to my father if I see him ever again. Because now I'm big. I'm big boy now. The last time I saw him, I was small. I shouldn't have said that. Somebody's gonna clip it.
And then we look at the drug addict, and we say to the drug addict, how can you possibly do this to yourself? How can you possibly inject this terrible substance into your body that may kill you? But look at what we're doing to the earth. We're injecting all kinds of things into the atmosphere and the oceans and the environment that is killing us, that's killing the earth.
That is also
So which
true.
addiction is greater?
On this scale, what he says with about the Earth, it's absolutely true. It doesn't phase us at all because it's so huge. It is so vast. We don't think about it because it's just a drip, a little tiny drip on the hot stone. But eventually, future generations are gonna have to pay for it. Or are they? Is it just part of the evolution now? Is it just how it's gonna be? It is just accepted and people are gonna have to work around it and they're gonna find a way up around it. It's going on slow anyways. Because it's so big. The ocean is so large. 90% of the ocean is not even discovered, as far as I know. 90%. That's 100%. What are we talking about? What is happening, dude? Wherever I look, whatever connection I make, everything is fascinating. Because it's just how? How are we still going? Like, what is happening, dude? It's so crazy.
The addiction to oil or to consumerism, which causes the greater harm? And yet we judge the drug addict because we actually see that they're just like us, and we don't like that. So
Yeah, we don't
say,
like
you're
it.
different from us. You're worse than we
Just
are.
judge. That's human nature. Point finger, say bad, and be together. Hating something together
On the
connects people.
plane to Sao Paulo and Rio de Janeiro, I was reading the New York Times on June the 9th, and it was an article
unfair.
about Brazil. And the article was about a man called Nigio Gomes, a leader of the Guarani people in the Amazon, who was killed last November. And you probably heard about him. And he was killed because he was protecting his people from the big farmers and companies that are taking over the rainforest and destroying the rainforest, and they're destroying the habitat of the native Indian people here in Brazil. And I can tell you that coming from Canada, the same thing has happened over there. And many of my patients were actually First Nations Indian people, Native Indian people in Canada. And they are heavily addicted. They make up a small percentage of the population, but they make up a large percentage of the people in jail, the people who are addicted, the people who are mentally ill, the people who commit suicide. Why? Because the lands were taken away from them, and because they were killed and abused for generations, generations, and generations. But the question I ask is, if we can understand the
But this is
suffering
real
of these native
abuse.
people and how that suffering makes them seek relief from pain in their addictions, what about the people who are perpetrating it? What are they addicted to? Well,
Gaining
they're addicted to
something
power.
from other people's
They're addicted to wealth.
suffering.
They're
Power
addicted
and
to
wealth. Yeah.
acquisition. They want to make themselves bigger.
Yeah.
And when I was trying to understand the addiction to power, I looked at some of the most powerful people in history.
When you
I
have a
looked at
winner, there is always a
Alexander the
loser.
Great. I looked at Napoleon. I looked at Hitler. I looked at Genghis Khan. I looked at Stalin. It's very interesting when you look at these people. First of all, why did they need power so much? Interestingly enough, physically, they were all very small people,
Yes.
my size, or
5
smaller,
foot, 5'1" or
actually
so.
smaller. They came from
I wish to be smaller,
outsiders.
honestly.
They were not part of the
Just a little
major
bit.
population. Stalin was a Georgian, not a Russian. Napoleon was a Corsican, not a Frenchman. Alexander was a Macedonian, not a Greek. And Hitler was an Austrian, not a German. So a real sense of insecurity and inferiority. And they needed power to feel okay in themselves, to make themselves bigger. And in order to get that power, they're quite willing to fight wars and to kill a lot of people.
They are long gone dead. You can't know their drive and motivation because they want power. Everybody wants power, but it's not like, because he was small. You can't say that. But you have to generalize it because in some sense it is true. Right? Power. Everything is so sad. This stream is so sad.
Just to maintain that power. I'm not saying that only small people can be power hungry, but it's interesting to look at these examples because power, the addiction to power, is always about the emptiness that you try and fill from the outside. And Napoleon, even in exile on the island of St. Helena after he lost power, he said, I love power. I love power. He couldn't think of himself without power. He had no sense of himself without being powerful externally.
Where does the sense come from?
And that's very interesting.
They probably just got
when you
raised
compare
like
it
this.
to people like the Buddha
But then
or Jesus.
where does it come from?
Because if you look at the story about Jesus and Buddha, both of them were tempted by the devil. And one of the things that the devil offers them is power, earthly power. And they both say no. Now, why do they say no? They say no because they have the power inside of themselves. They don't need it from the outside. And they both say no because they don't want to control people. They want to teach people. They want to teach people by example and by soft words and by wisdom, not through force. So they
get
refuse
respect,
power.
not from
And
fear.
it's very interesting what they say about that.
That's the most important.
Jesus says that the power and the reality is not outside of yourself, but inside. He says the kingdom of God is within. And the Buddha, before he dies and his monks are mourning and crying and they're all upset, he says, don't mourn me, he says, and don't worship me. Find a lamp inside yourself. Be a lamp unto yourselves. Find the light within. And so as we look at this difficult world with the loss of the environment and the global warming and the depredations in the oceans, let's not look to the people in power to change things. Because the people in power, I'm afraid to